Good afternoon and welcome to this workshop. My name is Charlotte. Most of you I know through the Climate Salad community. And I'm going to share my screen and I have hit record, which is fantastic. Good afternoon and welcome to this workshop, Navigating Regulation for Energy Innovation, in collaboration with the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action, also known as DEECA, and the Australian Energy Regulator, which we'll know as AER. My name is Charlotte and I'm joined by my incredible teammates from Climate Salad, Olivia, Audrey and Stefan on the line. And I know DEECA and AER will introduce themselves shortly. Thank you so much for joining us. And before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land of which we meet. And I do appreciate that is different for everyone. For me, that's the Gubbi Gubbi people. Wanya Nullam, welcome. And I pay my respects to their elders past and present and joining us today. And I also honour their continuous connection to country and recognise our First Nations people as the original and first climate tech innovators. Climate Salad, if you're not across what we do, we are one of Australia's leading climate tech networks of climate tech companies, founders, team members, mentors, supporters, and investors. And we are on a mission to help 1,000 climate tech companies reach their global potential. And we do this through programs, tools, and the power of community. And one of those programs is what we do in collaboration with government bodies and industry to help you navigate how to increase the potential of your business. Our agenda today, and please, it is very, very tight. We do have an hour of power online. Usually we run these as a lunch and learn. So, you can have quick bites to eat, but I would love it if you could turn your camera on because that makes it so much more engaging. And please in the chat, put in, the country you're calling in from, the land of which we meet. So we are going to go into an overview of DEECA's DEEP initiative, as well as AER's Energy Innovation Tool. Then we are going to break into rooms, and there was a pre-poll sent out beforehand, and the two topic areas that were identified were virtual power plants and network tariffs. So please do select the breakout room that is of most interest to you and that is most engaging for you as well. Do bear in mind that we are unable to address your individual specific business model needs, but we are looking at the climate tech and energy innovation sector as a whole. We will be taking notes, and if there are any questions that we can't answer, we will try to get back to you. Then we're going to go into a demonstration of the Regulation Navigator tool, and we will close, but that will not be the end of our engagement, obviously. You can always keep in contact with us, and we will show you how to follow up. So I believe we have Vivek on the line to take us through DEECA's DEEP initiative.
Thanks, Charlotte. And apologies, I just came in on time. So hi, everyone. And thank you, Charlotte, for kicking this off. So thanks again for joining. Good to see all this engagement on a Monday afternoon at lunchtime. So I really do appreciate you all tuning in today. I thought I'd just give some real quick context on the DEEP program, or the Digital Energy Economy program. So the key aim for this initiative is to firstly understand the gaps and barriers faced by energy tech startups in Victoria. And then, we're looking to test some of the initiatives, test some of those barriers with some initiatives that we think might help addressing those barriers. So we've had 3 pilots that we're calling that we've sort of tried as part of this program. The first one was really the recent wrap up that we had with Launch Vic, a partnership that we did with them on the Civic Labs Digital Energy Challenge. That was a 6-week accelerator aimed at supporting digital energy tech startups in Victoria that are at a very early stage and want to further develop their solutions. The second one is the Energy Market Ready grants. You may have heard about that and got some communication through actually these webinars as well. And that's just recently finished up as part of the selection process. So we'll announce some successful applicants for that as well. And finally, this particular part, which is obviously one that we've partnered with Climate Salad to deliver in seeking to address some of the sort of information barriers and sort of the lack of know-how that we got some feedback on from startups around getting the heads around regulatory and policy hurdles. So yeah, we are very grateful for the Australian Energy Regulator to join us today and talk about their Energy Innovation Toolkit service. And without further delay, I will pass on to Lyndall, or should I pass back on to you, Charlotte?
No, you can pass straight on to Lyndall. I'll stop sharing because Lyndall has some amazing slides to present.
Great.
Thank you, Charlotte. I'll see if we can get these up on the screen. Hopefully everyone can see those. Lovely. All right. We are the Energy Innovation Toolkit. I see a couple of familiar faces around the room. Thank you to those who are already familiar with us for coming along. I hope we'll be able to share some learnings that we've got from the past nearly a year, about 10 months of operation, which is very exciting. So the Energy Innovation Toolkit is a regulatory sandbox. And I'll go into a little bit of detail about what that means. Basically, to start us off though, obviously the network and the market in which we operate is quite complex. The little infographic on the side here shows the different regulatory frameworks that apply throughout Australia, noting that there is the pale blue sections in Northern Territory and Victoria particularly, which are governed by slightly different frameworks. That being said, all of these areas in the eastern states form part of at least part of the same grid, and as such are governed by a reasonably common set of rules and regulations. That being said, there's thousands and thousands of pages of them. I think by last count, it's probably about 5,000 pages of energy laws, rules, regulations, gas equivalents. One person could not possibly understand all of it. That's where we come in. You're thankfully getting a little bit more from our service than just connecting with us. You are though also connecting with a lot of other experts. So let me talk about the market and some of our project partners, of which the Essential Services Commission, Chris, our project partner, is here today. So how they all fit together. At the top of the framework, we've got our energy ministers, but beneath that, they are the ones who, through Parliament and through mutual state agreements, enact these laws that apply. We've then got our market bodies, of which the AER is one. We've got AEMO, who operates the market. We've got the AEMC, who goes through the process of consulting on rule changes and developing subordinate legislation. And then we've got the AER, which is us, and we enforce the rules, and we are the economic regulator in this area. We also in Victoria then have the Essential Services Commission, which fulfills a very similar role to really the AEMC, I suppose, and the AER is possibly a good analogy. They are the regulator for the Victorian framework dealing with licensing in Victoria, because there is a separate retailing framework in Victoria. We're very pleased to have all of these parties as our project partners, which enables us to give a much better service overall and a much more holistic set of guidances on the different topics that might be relevant to our innovators. So we have a couple of different functions, but our ultimate aim here is to reduce barriers to innovation. That is our number one goal. And I think we're slowly getting there and getting some shared information out there and creating the possibility for trials to proceed. What are our services? There's three of them all up. The first one isn't a conventional regulatory sandbox. It's a guidance service. We call it the Innovation Inquiry Service. It is a free service. You can reach out anyone who has an energy question that's within our jurisdiction, that's within the national framework or within the Victorian framework, can reach out to us and ask us questions. We will then give you fast, frank feedback. That is staff level guidance on questions. And we use the kinds of questions that we receive through the IES to inform policy thinking and to share learnings. You know, yes, we're getting a lot of questions about this. This might mean there's a lot of uncertainty here. We need to publish more information, or even alternatively, there's a lot of problems with this framework. People are running up against a wall here and trying to innovate, but they're experiencing barriers. What can we do about that? The second and third powers are trial powers. Now that's a bit different from, we won't facilitate or fund a trial, but we can enable trials to occur where all the parties are already lined up and ready to go if there's a legislative barrier. If anything under our jurisdiction is posing a regulatory barrier that there's good reason to reconsider, we can potentially give waivers or rule changes, depending, either us or the AEMC, to enable that trial to occur. Other tools, we have the Regulation Navigator tool, which my colleague Anthony will take us through later. It's a really useful on-the-spot feedback tool that gives guidance tailored to your circumstances based on a short survey. We've also got a bunch of case studies, and I really encourage everyone here to check out this website. It's got a lot of very useful information, and we update it quite regularly with new content and case studies based on the guidance that we provide. So we'll talk about this throughout the day, and you'll have the opportunity to talk to my colleagues Eugenie and Liz, who are both assistant directors in the team, about some specific situations that we run through and that we experience a lot of, and I know that a lot of you are very interested in shortly. But at any stage, please reach out to us. We've got some contact details here. Similarly, the ESC, you can read more about their specific sandbox, but it all comes through the same space. Everyone comes through the portal that we've designed through our website, and there is a contact us form on that website where you can reach out and get in touch with us after you've had a look at all the information on the website. If there's still questions you have, we absolutely love hearing from innovators. So I think that's about the end of that. I'm happy to take some questions now, Charlotte, but if there's a better time for that later, let me know.
I think that's, we're actually running incredibly on time for the agenda. So I've just launched a poll to see if these services are of interest and helpful for you. But we do have time for a couple of questions before we break into the breakout rooms and go into a deep dive of the network tariffs as well as the virtual power plants. Do we have any questions from the floor? Ooh. Fantastic. Maybe we do break into, when we break into the rooms, this is your chance to ask those questions. We will have the Australian Energy Regulators, Lyndall and her team, manning both of those breakout rooms, as well as Climate Salad and DEECA. So this is your opportunity to go deep with questions. Again, we cannot answer your specific business and individual needs, but looking at the industry sector as a whole and see what we can help eliminate together in terms of barriers. All right, we shall launch those breakout rooms.
You should see them pop up and then have two options. If they haven't popped up for you, have a look at the bottom of your screen. If you've got a little breakout option there that you can press, sometimes it doesn't automatically pop up for people on their screen. And then you should be able to join either room, so virtual power plants or network tariffs. You can see people going in now. Great. Let us know, come off mute if you can't see it or if you're having trouble joining the rooms. We're going to have Olivia in this main room support if anyone drops off or can't make it into the rooms. We'll see you in there otherwise.
See you in there soon. I will join virtual power plants, and Audrey, if you want to join network tariffs.
Absolutely. See you in there.
Is there anyone else in here? Heaps.
Yeah, got a few people joining. Always good.
Wonderful. So great to see all your fantastic faces for this this call on virtual power plants. Liz, would you like to take us through just an overview, and then we can go into a Q&A and better understand?
Sure, definitely. And we've also got our colleague Chris here from the ESC. So maybe once I've finished, we can have a quick spiel from you, Chris, about sort of how best to engage with you, noting that we're all project partners, so we do all work quite closely together. But yes, onto virtual power plants. So there is a lot of interest about what virtual power plants are, and it can be both very simple on the face of it, but then also sort of very confusing, and what does it actually mean in terms of energy regulation, and what do I need to do to actually start one or participate in one. So it's easiest to think about virtual power plants as a concept. So very briefly, or very sort of basically, it's refers to a collection of distributed power generating units that are connected by software that make up a larger power plant. So it's really all about scale. And one comparison I really like is the VPPs are kind of like a computer network. So on its own, one computer can only do so much. It has sort of a small processing power. But together, once you combine them into a network, 1,000 computers can achieve so much more. And that's exactly what a VPP is like. And once you have that sort of mass, it starts to operate on a similar scale as a large battery or a power plant, which is how we get to virtual power plants. So yeah, so the defining feature is that it's connected by a central operator, a VPP operator, and they do this using software that they've developed. So we did have a slide, but I'm not sure if we can bring it up very quickly, Charlotte.
You should be able to. Everyone can share screen. So just down the bottom, I know that we use Zoom, not Teams. So just down the bottom is the little box with an arrow pointing upwards, share screen.
Can't seem to, it's fine. So I'll try and paint a bit of a word story. So the thing about VPPs is that depending on what you want to actually do and what you want to actually achieve, VPPs can operate across the energy supply sector. So if you look at the generating side, you can get a VPP to aggregate together small generating units. And this is one of the few areas where you do actually need to, there is sort of a specific role for SGAs and a specific need to register, but they can sort of, again, aggregate them together and operate like a power plant or battery. You then also have that sort of through the supply chain, and then you also have the ones that people are probably more familiar with, the VPPs on the consumer side. So where a consumer has a solar and battery system, they can participate in VPPs. I would say that VPPs, while the concept and idea has been around for a while, there's still a lot of work and a few different trials happening to sort of see, how these can operate, how these best work and contribute to the sector. Now, getting into, okay, heard sort of the concept of a VPP, know what it does, what can I do? It really comes down to what you actually want to achieve. Do you want to use this to sell to customers? Do you want to use this as a way to support more renewable investment in the energy system? So one of the common questions we've had is, we want to set up a VPP because we want to support greater investment in renewable generation, and we want to use it in the local community. So one of the questions in that is, so do you actually want to sell to consumers, and how do you actually want to be involved in it? So also taking a step back, if you want to, it can be difficult, or you actually can't, unless there's a direct line, you can't sell specific electrons to an end user. So the way the market works is generation occurs, it's sold into the NEM, and then a customer buys that. Unless there is that direct line, you can't guarantee that the end user is actually using those electrons that were generated nearby. So one of the so some of the advice we provide as well is, oh sorry, yeah, Charlotte.
I was just about to say, sorry, Liz, I feel like someone just had a question then. So did someone just have a question? Because I was about to ask, with a VPP, then if you can't guarantee it has come from renewables, is that right?
Yes. So unless there is that direct line, you can't say that the electrons that you're buying is directly from renewables.
Mm.
And that's just because once energy is sold into the NEM, it's traveling at the speed of light. So yes, just from sort of a technical point of view, that can't work.
Okay. No, that's good. Thank you. Keep on going. And if anyone has questions or is currently using these sort of business models or how they'd like to see the opportunity in this, but keep going, Liz.
Awesome. And then one of the frequent questions we ask people as well is, do you actually want to be selling to consumers? So there is a number of rules and regulations around directly selling to customers, and what sort of, depending on what business model you have, if you need to have a retailer, if you need to partner with one, become one, if there's an exemption available, and there's also the possibility of participating in secondary market or ancillary services. So FCAS is something that's used a lot, but there are a few different other markets that are just, VPPs can be used to help provide energy and security and reliability in times when something's gone wrong in the NEM, or something has happened and they just need a little bit of extra help. So long story short, there's lots of different ways that you can use VPP in the market. It really comes down to what problem you're trying to solve, what role you actually want to take. VPPs can be very useful, but there are also other alternatives, and there can be other solutions. Like I said, there's a lot of work being done in terms of VPP trials. So if you go onto the ARENA website, they have a lot of sort of information about the different trials that are happening, and also on our Energy Innovation Toolkit website, we also have a few articles and regulatory explainers about VPPs and just sort of different considerations in sort of setting up a VPP project, and then also the necessary registration and regulatory requirements. So that's kind of the end of my VPP spiel. Chris, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything, or we can jump into questions.
I might just add that we're sort of starting to see a few more inquiries come to the Commission around selling into the wholesale market. So it might be related to a VPP or other type of generation asset, and that seems to be spurred on by the new small aggregator registration category with the Australian Energy Market Operator. And so in Victoria, any type of sale of electricity requires either a license or an exemption, or a trial waiver is the third category, which is part of the regulatory sandboxing framework. So yeah, I think that we probably will continue to see more of those sorts of inquiries come through, but yeah, happy to open it up. Thanks.
Ross, you had a great question.
Yeah, it's more asking about how demand response currently fits, because from what I understand, virtual power plants currently are mainly generation based rather than actually, say, reducing swimming pool load or another large load to help with that overall pricing arbitrage. So I'm just wondering how that fits in at the moment?
Sure. So they can be used in terms of that arbitrage. It really depends on whether or not there's a battery as part of the VPP. So, and again, as I'm sure everyone on this call knows, batteries are great because they can sort of soak up that energy when it's, you know, cheap and abundant, and then yes, provide those demand response opportunities when prices are high. So VPPs can help with that. You just need to make sure that the right sort of registrations are done.
The other thing to note with that is that, you know, load control and the like, it all depends on the VPP that you establish. Do you have a mechanism for controlling behind the meter loads? Do you have the customer's consent for that? How has that all been set up? It's all possible to do these things. It's just a question of how you establish your VPP. And this is what we mean when we say how broad VPPs are. They can be whatever you really want them to be to an extent. And if part of that is then controlling load and, you know, timing the use of high energy usage devices at certain times, is if you've got the mechanism for controlling that, and I know that there are software platforms out there that can offer those services, then absolutely that's something that's absolutely possible. There are some limitations on some of the kinds of services that some VPPs can provide in different states in terms of those demand response services, but we can go into those in more detail if you have any follow-up questions at all.
Thank you. Definitely interested in learning more about that. Thanks.
Mari, you had a question. Would you like to come off mic and ask that?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks. Yeah, there's definitely an increasing focus on cybersecurity with energy as a essential industry targeted. Things like the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act and a lot of reviews at sort of federal and state level and that. So I'm wondering how you see that impacting on VPP models.
In terms of that, I don't think there's no view of how that will impact VPP models specifically, but I think we're all sort of looking at those reviews and going to see sort of what sort of we're going to do in terms of the critical infrastructure sort of aspect of the market.
We haven't had a number of questions about that area specifically, but it's certainly an area that we're interested in. We have had one or two questions that's touched upon sort of the data usage and control over that, but less about the actual cyber element of control of that infrastructure. It's certainly something of interest though.
Okay, thank you.
Paul, did you want to ask that question?
It's not so much a question, just a comment on cybersecurity. Yeah, but on that, so a lot of cybersecurity initiatives, particularly around critical infrastructure that are happening overseas, and there's a lot of activity happening around 2030.5 control, which VPPs use, would break a lot of regulation systems currently, metering being one, but predominantly also market bids as well. And you're saying that you can't verify proof of source. That's under current configurations, but there are ways to do that. The issue is, how do we actually get them from isolated, disconnected proof of concepts into an operational network? You know, you mentioned ARENA. ARENA is quite a
things that are going to be changing, and all sort of the rules and regulations in terms of AEMO system requirements and everything. So yes, we're all just watching and seeing what happens.
Sorry, I did cut out there, so I did miss that. But please, can I get an understanding from the room who is exploring or already using VPPs as part of their business? Ross. Oh, Paul as well.
And I'll just to tell you what we're doing. So we're working with Plenty, who's involved in the financing for some of these virtual power plants. So helping consumers understand the benefit of a VPP is kind of where we fit in. Well, I'll just share that.
Yeah, I guess I can talk about quickly where Rove's going. So we're developing EV conversion kits for utes, which will include V2G capability. And so naturally we think about the value streams for the asset owners, and aggregating those utes in a VPP is one such possible stream. But it's early days for us in the energy use case regard for these bidirectional utes. We actually have to, there's lots of hurdles for V2G before we start contemplating VPPs.
So is this something the AER services have you already reached out to? Are this is helpful?
We have not reached out as yet, but just, I guess, understanding the regulatory space in Australia, and also how we might address some of those challenges around, accurate metering and sub-metering, and recognising that if these utes are sitting behind a connection point with other loads going on behind that same connection point, how do we deal with all those sort of things? The usual questions, I suspect, but we have not reached out yet.
And we can definitely help with the sort of regulatory requirements and sort of rules. What we don't do is provide sort of the more professional services sort of side of things. So going into the different business models that are available, or providing sort of legal advice or anything. But there are aspects that we could definitely help out with.
Cool.
Liz, what are some of the opportunities that you see in terms of what are the successful business models, and Anthony, that have taken full advantage of PPs?
So again, it really comes down to what people sort of want to do. I think we've seen sort of there's a few different VPPs in operation with, I think there's the South Australia VPP that I think a lot of people are familiar with. And then, yes, you'd also have the ones that are sort of operating on the more generation side as well. So again, it really comes down to what people want to achieve.
Ross, you came off mute for a second there. Can you tell us about some, I guess, the opportunities you see in utilising?
Well, I think most energy retailers now are working on a strategy towards having a VPP, because they all got burned in the wholesale market. And so a VPP offers some way of them reducing that risk. Where I see the issue is the consumer, i.e. the household, or the business signing up, understanding the benefits of a VPP. They're being offered, $100, $200 to be able to participate, with a number of parties on the back end doing the smarts, i.e. like an Evergen, and obviously the retailer with their arbitrage. But it's kind of, I think we've got to think about how do we get consumers on board to VPPs, and especially when to Paul's point, when they're able to charge their car into the grid or to their home. So there needs to be an education piece here, I think, as well as a regulatory piece. That's my diatribe.
We are absolutely running on time, which means we will go back to the main room, and Joe from DEECA will be doing a quick summation of this breakout room. I guess the high level points. It doesn't sound like we've sort of like uncovered new barriers to accessing virtual power plants, but just a nice synopsis of the opportunity behind them, and I guess understanding that there are a lot of regulatory barriers, but there are services.
The biggest regulatory barrier people face with VPPs is that they don't understand the framework they're going into. It's a knowledge asymmetry with the industry because it is so complex, and that's what our industry, our service is intending to alleviate.
On that note, are there any more questions that maybe that we can help? I mean, you've got the brains trust of the AER here to be able to answer them for you live. Oh, Paul, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, it was probably just following on from what Paul's trying to solve. Is we have fixed constraints in our grid at the moment, and it doesn't allow flexibility in a real VPP VPP scenario. So V2G, for example, is a classic. A lot of people commute, drive to work, park their car somewhere. That device can be used for more than just demand generation and storage. It can be used in ancillary markets during the day while it's plugged in. It's quite lucrative. We don't have that capability today to identify that back to the owner of the asset. We do cryptographically, can do it. Legislatively, we don't.
Paul, have you ever read any work from Lee Brown at AEMO on that point?
So I've been in the deep workshops, and no one in the deep workshops is prepared to even put a foot forward around virtual NIMIs. There have been some pockets in it.
The idea of virtual or a floating NIMI is obviously ambitious. It's a massive upheaval, but that doesn't mean that it's not worth talking about, certainly. And you're not the first person to raise it in one of these sessions with us or an inquiry to us. And it's a point of great interest, and we love ambitious questions. The ones that really go towards new frameworks are the ones that can be really, really positive and have a lot of learnings to be shared with the broader industry. Do I have an answer for that right now? Absolutely not. But it's certainly something that we're open to talking to you about if you'd like to reach out.
So you're saying I should approach this from a regulatory perspective rather than through DEEP?
You're welcome to use both. We can absolutely partner with, we work quite closely with the Victorian government on a lot of these initiatives, but
that's not the Victorian government, that's the ESB group. Yeah, I'm not in Victoria, by the way, so I can't take advantage of that.
I see. Well, the AER is obviously the regulator for outside of Victoria in that framework.
Always happy to talk to people, just looking for opportunities of where we can actually go forward rather than just run these things in isolation. They're great to look at, but it's actually proof of seeing it working. That's the thing that we struggle with.
I guess from a Rove perspective, we are focusing on fleets where we will collect vehicles behind a connection point, which I guess maybe simplifies some of those things, but doesn't end up in a true V2G, flexible V2G situation where you're measuring the participation of each individual vehicle regardless of where they're connected.
Look, these are great questions and they're really interesting points. In terms of virtual power plants, probably not quite the same area of topic, and we can certainly discuss this in another forum. If you'd like to reach out, we've got the contact us forms there to keep going with these discussions, but not something we've prepared to discuss today, sorry.
I know it is so tempting to go into like the specific individual business needs, but I hope that we got a better summation of what the virtual power plants, the opportunity behind them, but also like a little bit of an understanding of the regulatory barriers that exist, but also that there's help. We will be rejoining the main room to go through the innovation navigation tool. and closing shortly. Thank you so much, but please keep those questions coming, put them in the chat, and also and send them to us because we can help follow up. I've just ended that poll, and it's good to see that everybody is really keen to hear more about the Australian Energy Regulators innovation tools and services. So before we get into a demonstration of that, could I have the DEECA representatives from each of the rooms to report back and just give a quick summation of what was uncovered in your breakout rooms, the virtual power plants, as well as the network tariffs, as everyone's joining us back.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. Do you want me to wait a little bit for people to bounce back in or go straight into it?
Yeah, that might be a good idea because we looks like we've had it looks like everyone's starting to join back in. I think it was just
Flooding
our
back in.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us back in the main room. And we have ended that poll, and it did look like most people are really keen to find out more about the Australian Energy Regulator innovation services and tools, which will go into a demonstration. But first, to hear from Joe from DEECA for a little summation of the virtual power plant breakout room before we go to Vivek for a summary of the network tariff breakout room as well.
Cool. I'll give a quick rundown. So in our group, Liz gave a really good breakdown and explanation of basically what VPPs were and how best they're used, depending on what people want to achieve, whether it's selling to customers, supporting local communities, operating the FCAS or secondary markets, or increasing renewable generation in energy systems. One of the points that was highlighted was that you can't sell specific electrons to end users. So there's no guarantee of those green electrons being traded. And there's further trials and information on the ARENA and AER website. But then we jumped into some questions from the participants. So Ross was asking about demand response opportunities that fit into the VPPs. So VPPs predominantly generation based as opposed to reducing load for price arbitrage. And it was brought up that the really key thing there is that if there's a battery as part of your VPP, then you can use it for that demand response price arbitrage, but that does depend on the load control capabilities of the VPP and what state you're in. So it is quite variable there. Murray asked us about, is there an with the increasing focus on cybersecurity of energy data, how do we see that impacting VPP models? We didn't land on a specific answer there, but it sounds like it's a very live and relevant issue that's being looked into. And there's still quite a dynamic space of developing those VPP rules and regulations. And then we talked about potential business models and opportunities that have taken advantage of VPPs. So the South Australian VPP was brought up, obviously generation side. And then Ross brought up that energy retailers are working on strategy to utilize VPPs to reduce risk of wholesale markets. And the challenge there is really about helping consumers to understand the value of being part of a VPP. And this seems to be an education piece and a challenge that cuts through all of VPPs. And as was brought up as well, a lot of people struggle to understand VPPs just because of the knowledge asymmetry within the industry. And then the last point that I'll say before I hand over to Vivek, we had a brief discussion about virtual NIMIs being needed as the next step to kind of support future VPPs and V2G, V2X, as opposed to our currently fixed metering. And it's a very ambitious idea right now, but it sounds like it's definitely worthwhile more conversation in that space.
Thank you so much for that great summary, Vivek.
Indeed, very comprehensive. Thanks, Joe. So with the network tariffs, we're Judini, who walked through the whole process of attempting to get a network tariff trial underway. The big takeaway is really that the DNSPs are the enablers here. The network service providers are the enablers here if you ever want to do a network tariff trial. they definitely can be costly and time consuming, can take close to 3 years, sorry, from end to end. And certainly you need to start very much at the beginning with a network service provider. And just another thing to note is that the national electricity rules do allow for trial tariffs, so it is possible. However, the network service providers, again, have ultimately the ones that would enable it. And feel free to butt in, Eugenie, if I've got any of this wrong. So the other thing to note is that, you know, there's this question around, you know, local energy and sort of having these local tariffs, in that, you know, local energy doesn't travel as far away, and, you know, you tend to think that you might be using this energy that's generated within your area. I mean, that's simply not possible, of course. Because you can't trace electrons once they're into the grid. So it's, you know, having this idea of custom tariffs based on local energy is clearly not possible in this current setup. And then, then also Eugenie talked about the strategies. First one is really definitely to approach the DNSP. However, you can also opt to partner to sell the energy directly to a retailer, for instance, i.e. partnering with a third party could be a very viable pathway as well. And in this case, you would also be able to aggregate your sort of behind the meter solution, say with a virtual power plant setup. Again, this would need, you know, partnership with a third party or an aggregator. And through that, you could also explore other kinds of services like the ancillary service and the FCAS markets, and potentially also using a solution for energy optimization behind the meter. Again, you're going to have to use a partnership here to navigate the market registration for these different types of avenues. We had questions on the steps on how to get a trial underway, and there was a handy resource shared on that, so I won't talk too much about that, but Climate Salad will send that through to you. And the last question was really around bi-directional charging and tariffs that enable that. There could be at least maybe one network service provider providing such a tariff. However, please do reach out to AER and they can look into that as well. That was it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And please be aware, we will be sending out the slides and resources to everyone. Feel free to keep on using the chat function to ask questions. We'll answer what we can, but this is not the end of the engagement, and certainly not the workshop just yet, because I'm going to hand over to Anthony Nguyen to take us through the navigation innovation tool.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. I'm just going to share my screen. Now, can everyone see the Energy Innovation Toolkit website, our homepage?
Sure can.
All right, perfect. So I'll just give a quick demonstration. So this is our home website. We're going to go to Navigating Energy Regulation, the Regulation Navigator tool, and it should take about 5 minutes. So we're going to press on Get Started. Yep. Okay, so before it's like a questionnaire. So just for demonstration and example purposes, my scenario is I've got a solar farm that feeds into a battery, and say that it's located in Central West New South Wales, that aim to generate and sell electricity, and it is 10 megawatts. So to start off, we're located in New South Wales. Next, do you intend to sell or supply electricity or natural gas? We do intend to sell or supply electricity. So that's a yes. And do you intend to supply only electricity, only gas, or both electricity and gas? So for this example, just electricity. And do you intend to supply electricity only to customers in embedded networks or to other customers? So it's okay where, you know, there might be technical terms where you don't understand. We provide a definition of what an embedded network is. So for this example, it's going to be other customers. And do you intend to own, operate, or control an electricity network or network equipment, including an embedded network within a building? So because we are utilizing an electricity network, it's a yes. And do you know if the network will be classed as a transmission network, a distribution network, or an embedded network? So again, some technical terms, we provide the definitions. So it's okay if we don't know, because we do provide scenarios and relevant questions for that. For this example, we just do a distribution network. And do you intend to own, operate, or control equipment that generates electricity? So yes, I do have a battery, so that's a yes. And how large do you expect the generator or battery to be? 5 megawatts to 30 megawatts, because I said our one's 10 megawatts, a fairly reasonable size one. So do you intend to provide electricity ancillary services in the NEM? Example, using a generating unit or battery to offer FCAS or frequency control ancillary services in the wholesale market. Again, with the technical terms, we provide the definitions. So in this example, it's a yes. And do you intend to provide electricity wholesale demand response services in the NEM? Example, providing services where large customers are rewarded for reducing their electricity consumption at peak times. That's a yes. And do you intend to own, operate, or control natural gas distribution pipelines? For our example, it's a no. Yep. Let's not overcomplicate things with gas, putting gas in the mix. Okay, so we got our results, and here are the links that give you guidance on what to do for your relevant scenario. So if I give you an example, because we are generating electricity, if I click here, we might need to register with AEMO as a generator, apply for an exemption. And when you click on this link here, it provides further information on what to do. So that's my that's my demonstration of our Regulation Navigator tool. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Anthony. We hope the information that produces is really useful as a starting point. That's usually enough to get people a basic understanding of the kind of obligations that might apply. All of those responsibilities come with a short description of all of the key obligations, and then it also sets out possible exemptions, links to further information, and who you need to talk to next. That's a really good starting point. Probably not the end of the set of questions for the average innovator. You might need to come to us and have a chat. We can give you some guidance at a staff level, and maybe that can kick off the next set of discussions. But that tool is immediate, it's available 24/7, and it's usually a really good starting point. Thanks for demonstrating, Anthony.
No worries.
Thank you so much for your time today. We are ahead of schedule, so if you do have any last minute questions, please pop them in the chat or come off mic and ask them. But thank you so much for your time today and your input. We will be sending out a summary of this, as well as the notes shared and slides shared today, as well as how to get in contact with the AER, DEECA and ourselves. For Climate Salad, tomorrow we are having a launch party celebration for the industry report launch into climate tech in Sydney. Tickets are available on Humanitix, but it is selling fast. And we will be holding a launch event in Melbourne on August 2nd. So keep your eyes out for that as well, because we love to see you in person, in real life. Thank you so much for your time today. Do we have any final questions? You have a couple of minutes back in your day. Thank you so much for your time and energy and input. And, you know, this climate action is a team sport. So I really do appreciate your collaboration and cooperation with this. And that was definitely an abundant theme that came out of both breakout sessions, that we do need to collaborate more. And it's so great that during this workshop, we've had a collaboration between Climate Salad, DEECA and AER. Thank you so much.